in sales, it's very important for us to connect with our audience and be able to really have that emotional connection and that personal connection with the people that we're trying to sell to.
Interesting. It's actually funny that you mentioned that, Christine. As a matter of fact, would you like to say hi to our audience for TechLifeSkills?
Oh, I would love to say hello. Hi, everybody. Hey, thanks for joining us today. This is so amazing. I love to connect with you all and learn about selling and learn about the different ways to connect with technology.
Thank you, Christine. Join us in 30 minutes for the 13th episode of TechLifeSkills with Tanmay. Hello, and welcome everybody to the 13th episode of Tech Life Skills with Tanmay. I hope you're all doing well. Thank you for joining today's live stream. Now, throughout this series, we have seen that one common thread has always been innovation. So we've heard from leaders with years of experience, people who have had a pioneering role in their industries. But this brings us to the other side of the coin. Now, when new techniques and when new technologies are developed, there has to be somebody with the responsibility of actually bringing that tech into the hands of consumers. And that's called sales. And without it, major innovations would just sit around in a lab. And that's why I am so excited about today's episode. We are going to hear from a leader in the true sense. You would be missing out not to hear from the wisdom and the experience that she's going to bring on. Now, our special guest is a former Fortune 500 executive in charge of sales and revenue teams. She has over 20 years of experience, and she's a strategic advisor at the C-Suite Network. Her name is Christine Gilroy, and she's a revenue officer at Vintelis. And so now, without any further ado, let's welcome Christine. Welcome to the show, Christine. I'm very excited to have you on.
Hi, Tammy, and thanks for having me. I'm excited to join you and your audience today. And thanks for the great introduction.
Thank you very much, Christine. Again, it's an honor to have you on the show. And before we begin, would you like to quickly introduce yourself?
Sure. So currently I am an advisor to a couple of tech companies. One's a tech startup, and then also through the C-Suite Network, I advise companies that are starting out from a perspective of getting their product out to market. And so these companies are artificial intelligence based solutions. And Vintelis, as you mentioned, is one that is geared towards sales. So selling technologies that are generated by AI activities. And so from that, I bring with me 25 years of experience. I've been selling technology since I was 25 years old. I happened into it by accident, and I just lucky that I found something that I'm so passionate about and I love. And so I look at this as me giving back all the things that I've learned along the way over these years, and hope that I can help the next generation of sales and sales leaders really come into their own.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing, Christine. I mean, it's always, it's great to see how people can find what it is that they're passionate about, right? I mean, once you find what it is you're passionate about, doing it is it's second nature to you. But I feel like finding what it is that you're passionate about in the first place, that's always the challenge. And that's why it's so important for, educational institutions and all these sorts of things to really introduce the youth to all sorts of fields, including tech. As a matter of fact, that actually brings me to my first question that I have for you today. And this is something that isn't directly related to the field of tech sales. In fact, it's pretty generic, I would say, but it's related to the field of tech in general. And I wanted to ask you more on a high level about careers, right? So I know that you sort of happened into the world of tech sales, and it's nice that you found something that you're so passionate about, but I want to make it so we can more reliably find out what it is that people are passionate about. So we can more reliably find out, what career someone should go into where they're going to be having fun every day, doing the work that they do. And do you think, there are possibilities for our youth to sort of use the technology that we're already using every day alongside new ones, like, for example, maybe AI, artificial intelligence technology? Could we do things like, for example, analyze behaviors, analyze interests, and try and figure out where exactly somebody might want to steer themselves towards in the future in terms of their careers? What are your thoughts on that?
I do. I actually think that's something that we need to take a deeper look into. I happened into technology by accident. It wasn't something that I ever knew or understood. When I was going through high school and into college, it was just never even something that I thought about. And so in today's world, I think that we think more about technology because it's everywhere and it's surrounding us, but it doesn't lead us towards career choices. So I
Hmm.
think your question is really interesting in the fact that we use solutions and AI technology to learn behaviors for consumers so that we can sell them more products or more solutions. And so I believe that it's on us as technology and innovators to innovate something that looks at the behaviors of teenagers and youth on social media and help use that knowledge to guide them towards different careers. So you can analyze what they're doing or what they're saying and what their interests are, and then push them towards different type of careers. For instance, if I'm always on Twitter or Snapchat or Instagram and I'm posting pictures of animals and I love animals, then be able to offer them up, hey, here's how you would get into veterinary school, or here's all the different types of careers that are involved in dealing with animals, and exposing our youth to your likes which match different career choices, so that
Hmm.
everything doesn't have to always be so set, right? I want to be a
Hmm.
technology developer or a doctor or a lawyer. We sometimes just simply don't know. And so broadening that perspective and being able to push ideas to them at that age and meet them where they're at, I think is something that we need to do.
Very nice, very nice. Broadening perspectives, that's sort of the key word that I'm taking away from there. And what you mentioned almost gives me the sense that, as technologists, it's our responsibility to expose the youth to to these different careers so that they can choose what it is that they want to do in the future. And I actually want to ask you, what role can all of us play in exposing the youth to all these different, careers so they can choose what it is that they're passionate about?
I think just even narrowing that down from a technology perspective, if we as people in technology, or people that are in that, join groups, get out there on social media and promote our careers and promote our interest to others so that we can reach maybe disenfranchised youth or people
Hmm.
that don't have a path to college, or different things, and they're not as lucky to be already in the technology career. I think it's on all of us to locally go into the schools, go into chat groups or wherever you can reach them at any age, and
Hmm.
talk about it. Talk about your career, talk about why you chose it. When you do that peer level interaction, I think that it creates more excitement and more trust. If you have a 20-year-old advertising out and reaching to other 20-year-olds that maybe aren't as lucky, saying, hey, this is a great career and look at what I'm doing and you can do that too, you start to pull in people into the goodness of all the different opportunities and
Hmm.
really evangelize. And I think that that's something that we need to do at the early ages and continue throughout our career, is find ways to evangelize and make those exposures happen. It's so simple, right? You can do
Hmm.
that on Facebook, you could do that on Twitter, just to talk about why you're interested in something and sharing what you're doing.
Hmm. I feel like today's episode is particularly well timed because just this Friday, 2 days ago, I held the first ever student special of Tech Life Skills with Tanmay. And what you just mentioned really reminded me of actually some of the things that we were talking about, right? So, for example, both of the guests on the show on Friday, both Michael and Ash, had not actually started their sort of higher education in the field of tech. Neither of them were sort of introduced to technology in high school or anything, but they still found tech and they just were so passionate about it that they wanted to learn more. And that sort of that passion drove them to learn more about the world of tech. And I feel like it's sort of similar in your case, how you happened into the world of tech sales. And you're absolutely right. The more that people that are already in different careers can reach out to the youth, whether it's through social media or directly or through different sort of organizations, that enables the youth to sort of see what it's like to be working in different careers, figure out what it is that they're passionate about, so that they can actually go ahead and specialize in those fields in the future. Once you actually get to that age, like, I don't know, 20 years old or whatever, the preconceived notions that you have sort of give you a more of a closed mind when it comes to evolving into different fields. So you're right, the sort of younger that we get people into different fields, no matter what it is, it could be tech, it could be anything else, I feel like the more effective it is and the more exciting it is.
Yeah, I'll
And
give you an
so,
example of that. So my own son,
yes.
he's passionate about cars, and he really wants to be an auto mechanic. And
Mm.
he's grown up building old cars, so antique cars, and so he doesn't deal in the modern technology. And the more I started talking to him about technology, and his perspective, by the way, of technology was selling it, and he says, "I don't want to do what you do. That's not my thing, Mom." But when I started to help him understand the other areas of technology as it related to the automotive industry, and he looked at things like, for example, a company called Splunk. Splunk sponsors McLaren, and McLaren uses their technology to develop their cars that they race in Formula One. So they look at the data and the statistics, and they do all this analysis so that they can reconfigure the cars, and so that they can understand how to win the races. And so
Yeah.
when I started speaking to my son in those languages and helping him understand how technology enables what his passions are,
Yeah.
then he started becoming more interested, and the light bulb went off. So I think it's
Wow.
those kinds of conversations that those of us who are in technology have with the youth, so that they can understand what career opportunities are open to them. Because even in my own household, he wasn't connecting the dots, and so it was upon me to help reach out what I saw him be interested in, and help him understand how technology plays a part in that. And so that's on all of us in this industry. We have to have those conversations and tell those stories for them.
Very nice, very nice. And really, this entire conversation that we've had so far is really reminding me a little while ago, actually, many years, I think 4 years ago, I was in London, in the UK, and there was a keynote at the Apple headquarters for the UK. And while I was there, the main point that I had in my keynote for like the distinguished educators for Apple was that as educators, really what our responsibility is to make sure that we're able to help students find out what it is that they're passionate about, so that they can go ahead and solve the world's problems by specializing and by excelling in those fields while having fun, right? Development's a perfect example, right? Programming and working with technology is all about problem solving, and if we can help the kids find out that they might be passionate about tech or might be passionate about whatever, that's what's going to enable them to solve problems in the future. And so I feel like that's definitely really important. And another thing is that it's really nice to learn from experience, right? So you mentioned that your son, despite being in the same household as you, and despite you being so passionate about tech, didn't really pick up on that passion until you sort of took the initiative to bring it upon him. And now I want to learn from your experience directly. So, how did you get into the world of tech sales? What led to that? What was that chance encounter?
Oh, it was sort of by accident. I made a move from the West Coast well, West, Southwest in Arizona over into the Boston area. And so I was young in my, mid 20s, and I was trying out different careers through a temp agency. And the
Mm.
temp agency sent me to this tiny little software company in northern New Hampshire, literally in the middle of nowhere. The town had a blinking yellow light. And I was doing admin work for them.
Yeah.
And one of the VPs of sales walked by, and he heard me talking on the phone, and he said, "Wow, you're really great at that. I'd like to try something else out with you tomorrow." So when I came in the next day, he put me in an empty room with a Excel spreadsheet and a telephone, and said, "Try to call these people and see if you can get them to buy an extension on their software support." And I just happened to be good at it. And so it was really that silly and stupid that somebody heard me on the phone and said, "I think you'd be great in sales." And they happened to be a technology company. And so from there, I wanted to learn more about it, because the best sellers understand why something's happening
Hmm.
and what the outcome is that the customer is looking for. And I felt I couldn't do that unless I really understood what they were going through as an end user, and what the technology did. So I just started learning and self-teaching technology and different aspects of it, and I've not stopped since. So I continue to learn and continue to evolve my career. Even 25 years in, I'm constantly learning, and that's how I ended up in it, just by fate, I guess you could call it.
Wow, fate. That was incredible. The chance that somebody heard you on a phone and thought you would be good in sales. That's really interesting to hear, and that actually sort of makes me think about something else in the field of sales and really in the field of tech in general. I feel like this is important. Tech is such a wide-reaching field. It has such a large surface area that it affects everything that we do, right? From agriculture to our live stream today to everything. Technology is touching every single aspect of our lives. And tech sales is what's responsible for actually making it so that that tech goes from a research lab somewhere to actually being used, right? Being able to buy the different things that we have around us in order to actually, have them make them have an effect on our lives.
Mhm.
And what I'm wondering is, because it has such a wide-ranging impact, I think diversity in tech is just as, if not more important than diversity in even other fields. Because we need more diverse backgrounds for people to think in different ways, come up with different problems for us to solve. And so I want to ask you, from your experience and from what you've seen in the world of tech and specifically also tech sales, how do you think we can actually go about increasing the diversity within this field? Because we know why it's important, right? We want that cognitive diversity. We want more, equal treatment of all sorts of people. But how exactly can we go about that increasing of diversity within tech and
Yeah.
tech sales?
I think some of the conversations we've already had help that, right? So going into the local areas and reaching young people where they're at. So in order for tech to create more diversity, they have to have a broader pool of candidates to do
Hmm.
that. So we have to develop those candidates early on in their life and really expose that. And then once we have them and once they're available, we have to become allies and advocates for their career growth. And so being able to create different opportunities for them across the organization and being able to expose them to different things will help them understand what they're doing in tech. And I think that being able to engage all of the different players in that market, it helps us look more like our customers. So if we're selling one technology, we tend to, as technology companies, we tend to hire for our own culture and people look and feel just like us. And what we forget about is that our customers don't always look and feel like us.
Hmm.
And so from that perspective, we have to have a broader purview of the types of people that we hire and where we get them from, and that only comes from being able to reach them at an earlier age. And so I think that's all kind of that same conversation is go where they are earlier and help guide them so that we have a pool of candidates available to us, and then once they're there, continue to nurture and advocate for them beyond just mentoring, but helping them reach different levels and exposing them to different things. So
Hmm.
just because I got into tech sales at the very early stage, I never had any other exposure to technology. There wasn't anybody saying, hey, maybe you might want to develop, or hey, maybe you might want to do this. It was just by nature, I ended up doing something I loved. But I think it's important at that age in your 20s to be able to be exposed to different types of jobs and careers in the
Hmm.
technology spectrum. I look at Oracle. We had, when I was there 10 years, we had so many different groups that these kids could come in and work out of when they were out of college. And so making
Hmm.
sure that they switch jobs and that they change things up and not stick to one thing makes them a better, well-rounded employee and gives them different opportunities. GE used to be really great at that. Years ago, GE would move you from job to job. You'd spend a year or two in one job and then they'd move you to another, and then they'd move you to another. You may come back to the very first job you had at GE and make that your career, but they wanted you to be exposed to the whole company before you did that. And that's a really great thing that I think other companies should start to embrace.
Very nice, very nice. And what I love about what you mentioned there is because, a lot of people when they think about diversity, they think, we want to cherry pick candidates from specifically, purposely a wide variety of backgrounds so that we have that diversity. And that's definitely good, right? It's important to make sure you have diversity, but I feel like if we were to take a step back and we were to take a look at how do we get a diverse pool of candidates in the first place, that's what's important, because then we actually have, people who are, first of all, passionate about what they do, but also at the same time, we've got a lot of different people that are talented, that are skilled, and that are diverse at the same time. So, sort of taking that step back and taking a more fundamental, long-term approach, I think is definitely more important than that sort of short-term cherry-picking candidates approach. So that's
It's
that's a very
taking action, right? It's
yes,
taking
exactly,
action on diversity. It's saying, I'm not just hiring diversity candidates so I can check the box to say I have a good portfolio of diversity that
exactly.
my HR group is looking at to make sure I'm spread out. but that I'm putting those folks in teams and in groups together so that I can get the diversity of thought, so that I can come up with new creative ideas and ways to reach my market, because my market is diverse.
Hmm.
And I want to make sure that how I approach the market and what I do from a, even just from a selling perspective, is that I have that diversity of thought and that diversity of action in that. And so that's, I think, the next step that we need to really take a look at is, once we bring you into the organization, what do we do to keep spreading that diversity of thought around and utilizing our greatest assets?
Absolutely. It's really not just about ticking those boxes as you mentioned. It's about embracing that diversity and helping with that change, enabling it to happen, right? I mean, even just from an equality perspective, it's important that we have, diverse organizations. But even if you were to look for like, a business justification for this sort of stuff, it's very clear why it's important to have diversity within an organization. Your markets are diverse, right? You want to be able to actually target to them. And at the same time, we want cognitive diversity, right? We want people to think in different ways, so that they ask different questions, so that we change our processes in ways that are sort of the aggregate of many different thoughts. I mean, a good example, actually, this is pretty fun. There's that game that people would play where you would fill a jar with a bunch of little jelly beans, and you have to guess how many jelly beans are in the jar. One person usually can't get it super accurately. But if you were to ask hundreds of people, and if you were to average out their response, it usually always nearly matches the result of what's in the jar. So, having that diverse pool of candidates is definitely really important. And
I
so,
agree. That's awesome.
thank you. Yeah, it's a really fun example. So now I want to sort of ask you, I want to sort of pivot a little bit and go more generally towards the technology sector, and I want to ask you what kinds of sales careers actually exist within tech. So, I mean, we've talked a lot about, research and development on this show. Now I want to take a look in terms of the field of sales. What different kinds of careers exist? What kinds of how can people specialize within tech sales? Tell me about maybe the skills that are required. What exists for the field of tech sales.
Mhm. It's expanding as we go, and so most technology companies are going to have a variety of areas that touch the customer and are responsible for generating revenue. And so those are your direct revenue sellers. That's first and foremost. So my direct revenue sellers is, I'm working directly with the customer to sell it. I'm either going to be an inside salesperson, I'm going to be a business development person, like generating leads, or I'm going to be what they call a field salesperson. And so those field salespeople break down into different things as well, which is, I'm an account manager. Maybe I only sell to existing customers and I have to grow those accounts. Or I'm a net new person, which means I have to go out and find new customers and new logos. And
Mhm.
so those are the types of jobs that are there from a direct selling standpoint. Then you move into your influence sales. So there's partner sales positions. So you have your partner teams that create relationships with an ecosystem that helps us to get our word out there and to help find opportunities and to co-sell with us. And so there's those types of folks. And then you have sellers that are selling within the customer success team. So
Mhm.
technology companies, a lot of it is cloud or SaaS. And so you need a customer success team in order to renew. So my job is to make sure that the customer stays a customer and I'm continuing that recurring revenue.
Yeah.
So those types of careers. And then that's just one aspect of it, the people who are directly responsible for the revenue or the ecosystem for the influence. But then you have the folks that are also sellers, which are your pre-sales engineers or value engineers, they might be called. And so
Mhm.
those are the ones that maybe demo the technology. They're not the people who developed it, but they're the ones that put their fingers on it and they show the customer how amazing it is. And so
Yeah.
those are actually also salespeople. So they are paid bonuses on revenue, right? So
Mhm.
they're showing and demoing the technology. They're working as a part of the selling team and they're paid commissions on revenue that's being driven. And then there's the value engineers, which help work with the customers to and the sales teams to derive what the value is. So there, as you can see, there's a lot of different types of careers in sales
Mhm.
that don't have to be tied to one particular thing. And I'll
Abs-
tell you a quick little story. Once I went to club at Oracle and I didn't have a plus one. So I brought my mom. And the
okay.
reason I brought my mom is because when I was always gone traveling, she was the one staying at home with my son
Mhm.
to do all that. So I brought her. She one day comes running over to me at the pool and she says, I found this most exciting thing for you. You can change jobs. I met a guy at the pool and all he does is drive around San Francisco and he's here too. So he must do really well. And he never gets on an airplane. And I laughed and I said, Mom, that's not what I do. He's a hardware guy. So he sells hardware, so he sells more to his local market. I have to get on an airplane because I sell to a very broad, diverse set of customers across the United States. And so that's, I sell software and that's what I do. So it's also, there's that difference, right? So
Yeah.
what do you sell? Do you sell to your local market or do you sell across a broader market? And
Mhm.
so she didn't want me on airplanes. She wanted me to switch over to the hardware group at Oracle so that I could just drive around my local city. So there's those types of things you have to think of too, is what kind of lifestyle are you looking at when you get into sales, is
Mhm.
and you're developing your career. What are you really passionate about, but also how does it match your lifestyle? Because a
Yeah.
lot of us are on the road a lot, maybe not so much now with the COVID thing. When you're listening to this, we're in the middle of the shutdowns and restricted travel, but in general there's different types of selling that goes on. And so if you're a field salesperson, what do you want to sell in what industries? Because you may be more local or you may be required to travel a lot, so it depends on your lifestyle and how do you want to balance that out. Those are things you have to think about as you're building the career.
Absolutely, and it's really interesting to see that sort of like lifestyle aspect that you mentioned, and you're right there. I feel like when you look at the field of tech in general, like even within like for example research, people don't realize that there's so many different kinds of roles within technology. It's not just building technology, and within sales too. It's not just sales. Sales, that's the umbrella, but there's so many little sort of intricacies that you can get into, and it's really interesting to see how you can specialize. So again, it comes back to what we were talking about and how it's important to introduce the youth to these sorts of careers at an early age, because before you sort of start to get older, you don't have those preconceived notions of what tech sales is like or what tech research is like, right? You have an open mind to hear more about these sorts of details, and that sort of leads into finding what it is that you're passionate about. So now that we've talked about what kinds of careers exist, how about we talk about what skills are useful? So, we know what sort of skills are useful for building tech, but what about selling tech? What kind of skills would lend to a successful career in tech sales?
Mhm. So I think first and foremost, you have to have the desire to win, right? That's number one. So you have
Hmm.
to really want to be involved in something where there's a winning element to it, and
Hmm.
so you then can put yourself into the motion to do the hard work that it's going to take to win. And
Hmm.
so you have to have that aspect of it. And then I think that you have to have a high emotional intelligence and be able to have empathy,
Hmm.
and you have to understand business acumen. So you need to be able to look at the world not just through your lens, but through someone else's lens,
Hmm.
and create that empathy for what they're going through and understand what their lens looks like. Or when they say walk a mile in their shoes, you have to be willing to walk in their shoes
Hmm.
so that you can understand what they're doing. When you have those kind of skill sets, those are leading you into that really successful world of selling, is because you're going to do whatever it takes to win. You're going to put the hard work and the sweat equity into it, but you're also going to understand how to put yourself into the other person's shoes. The other thing is really good active listening skills. Many people think they have great active listening skills, uh, but the listening is, I'm doing less talking, my customer is doing more talking. So having the skill to be able to listen, but also to be able to engage someone in a conversation where you keep them talking so that you can keep listening. That is one of
Hmm.
the most important things in a career in sales. So I'd say people that have backgrounds even in psychology, understanding human behavior, what makes people feel the way they feel, or understanding what motivates them and what they're trying to resolve in their own profession. Those skills are very, very good. So people that have business backgrounds, psychology backgrounds, those things play a role into it. And also just a desire to connect with people and give them a great outcome. So
Hmm.
those are some of the high level skills that are required, the most important ones. So empathy, active listening skills, business knowledge and understanding, and the willingness to win.
Very nice. The desire to win. I feel like that's
Desire.
pretty much the highlight of this. It's the desire to win, right? Because once you have that, everything sort of follows, right? The other things you end up learning through experience, through conversations like this one, being able to learn from experienced folks like you. But that desire to win is really the precondition for all of this. And now, sort of, let's talk more about the sort of passions. How exactly can you choose what to sell? Right? So can you somehow convert your passion, regardless of what it is, and sort of take that into a career of tech sales?
I believe so. Yeah. I think that it's important that you are selling something that you really fundamentally believe in and that you have a lot of passion for. That passion will come out in your conversations with your customers, and you will build immediate trust, and you will build that thought leader position that you so covet with your customers, so that they look to you as the expert. And so you have to have passion about that. So I would say you look at things that, what are things that are interesting to you? I mentioned the vet earlier. I have a friend that sells to vets. She sells technologies that is specific to veterinary clinics. And her
Hmm.
reason why she got into that was because she loved animals and she wanted to do something, but she
Hmm.
also liked technology. So somewhere along the line, she put two and two together that said, well, if I sell technology to vet clinics, I get to be around people who are helping animals. And so she
Hmm.
gets to tie those two things together. And then the lifestyle element came into play as well. So I think that when you look at what your passions are, again, if you're interested in sports, or you're like my son is interested in Formula One racing, if you look at that, then you can say, what are the things around that interest that I have that technology enables, and look for the types of companies that support and supply that environment. And those are the best ways to look at, so that you're passionate about what you're selling and you really enjoy offering that. And then the second thing, or kind of blended into all that, is if you're super excited about the outcome that you're giving the customer, the value that you're giving the customer, that's going to make you a better seller. So you do have to be passionate about what you're selling. So if
Hmm.
you really fundamentally believe that in sustainability is your thing and you really want to help create sustainability in the world, go find companies not only that are practicing sustainability, but help from a technology perspective enable other companies to build sustainability in their marketplace. And so follow that. So look at those things, list out what you're passionate about, try to find the technology companies that support that, and then make your goals to work for one of those companies so that you can learn.
Absolutely. I feel like really what it is around, within, especially within the field of tech sales, when you're passionate about something, that shows, right? When you're passionate about something, selling comes naturally because it's what you love. You genuinely believe in it. I feel like a good example again actually would be there's this famous sort of album of music called "Song a Day" where this guy's been writing a song every single day for the past 4,000 days, and they're pretty incredible. And occasionally he'll make like a little recap video for like different Apple events or different companies' events. And the latest Apple event, the WWDC event, the Worldwide Developers Conference, one of the sort of top comments on the WWDC talk around Craig Federighi, who's one of the VPs at Apple. Somebody actually commented, "I just realized this guy isn't a paid spokesperson; he's actually a VP at Apple." And you sort of get confused because when you're so passionate about the work that you do and you're so excited genuinely to bring it to people, that's sort of that's what comes across, right? And the same thing, right? Like today, I'm so excited to be talking about tech sales, right? Because I genuinely love building technology and believe that people should have access to that tech. And so now we talked quite a bit about the world of tech sales. I do want to quickly stream in a couple of questions from the live stream. We're getting lots of really interesting questions.
Sure.
And I want to start off with a question from Tassin. And he's asking, what is the current situation of tech sales in the COVID pandemic?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the honest answer is we're still trying to figure it out. So what's happening, and the way we look at that is, we're used to, as sellers, being able to have direct access to our clients, and our clients willing to engage in conversations with us. And that's lessening. One, because people aren't in the office as much anymore. They might be working from home, and so they're not as easily accessible. They might be buried in Zoom meetings and tired of reading their emails. And so it's harder to get them, and
Mhm.
it's harder to engage with them. And so when you take, from just even from a field sales perspective, which is more, the groups that I have been running, you no longer have that interaction face to face with your customer. So I call that the buyer seller gap, right? So it's
Mhm.
getting bigger and bigger, where the buyers are having this bigger gap with the sellers. And so it's starting to change. And we're still trying to figure that out, and how do we adapt to it. So it's being able to just be flexible and wait and see, and do the best we can to connect and engage with the people we're trying to sell to. So I wish I had an answer. I think that with time will only tell.
It's interesting to see that things are changing so quickly. Every single field has been sort of forced to just completely change the way that they work. Education's a good example. It's been a paradigm shift for education, and I'm sure that it's also going to be a paradigm shift for sales. And who knows, this might just force, the field of sales to continue to adapt to more, future technology and future sort of methods of doing the same things that they've been doing for years now, sort of force innovation to happen within that field. We are getting another question. This one's from Michael. He's asking, how do you find the right audience in tech?
Right. So does Michael mean the right audience of who to sell to? How do you find the person you're trying to sell to?
I believe so, yeah.
So, well, I mean, if you know who your target audience is, usually when you're selling something, your product marketing people or the engineers who have developed the solution have already identified what your target market is. And so the ways that you find them, especially now when it's harder to find people because we're all at home, is LinkedIn is a great source. So using things like Sales Navigator or social media, engaging your customers where your customers are at. So I think one of the ways of finding the right people is understanding what that persona is. What do they look like? I think a new term people call it is the avatar. What's the avatar? What do they look like? What's their
Yeah.
job title? What's their role? What's their, their interest? And once you figure that out, being able to engage them where they're at through social media and through campaigning. And so when I say go to social media, I don't mean just going into LinkedIn and email bombing or sending out sales navigator notes to everybody that saying, hey, I can help you. I can help you. I get probably 40 of those a day from people trying to help me enable my sales teams. And I don't need that, right? But what you do is if you comment on, you join groups that your customers are following, and you join groups that your customers are engaged with. So just like physically we would walk around the halls of a conference, those
Mm-hmm.
conferences are happening online now. So
Mm-hmm.
attend those, actively engage in those kinds of conversations, and you'll find your buyers there. So that's where they're going to be. If you start commenting, you start posting, you can find them there. And
Mm-hmm.
that's all throughout social media. But you do have to understand who your target audience is and what their
Mm-hmm.
persona looks like.
So being organic, I think, is a pretty interesting highlight there. You can't just email bomb like a bunch of people and be like, I can help you, right? Because everybody gets those, and our minds sort of filter those out instinctively, right? You see that on LinkedIn, your mind filters it right out. But when you have people that are organically interacting with you, that are part of your community, that trust is there, and that's a lot more effective. Now, a question from me. So we've talked about the importance and what our role is in helping the youth get into the world of tech. But how can we actually reach out to them and help them identify more with possible careers in tech?
With the careers?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, I think that we have to do, this is the conversation, right? We have to do a better job of getting into those local markets. There are places that we can guide folks to say, at a college, for instance. So I've taught a couple of classes as a guest speaker into the colleges to talk about sales and talk about careers in technology sales. And once we leave there saying, hey, here are some areas that you can go to enhance your sales careers. It's easy for me to say, go read a book, right? There's a ton of sales books, and I still read them because I always want to know and learn how are we adjusting. But being able to guide them to certain resources or certain communities that they can engage in to drive them towards an interest in tech sales. And so there's communities out there that already are established for that. And so you think of things like National Association of Sales Professionals. There's one for specifically for women in sales, tech sales. They can Google that, and all these associations will pop up. So I think participating in those associations and then helping to get the word out that those associations exist to the youth will
Mm-hmm.
help them get exposed to that, and then engaging them in. So there's programs out there, we talked about this earlier, there's programs out there called yearup.org.
Mm-hmm.
So if you go to yearup.org, they have technology careers that they're helping engage a wide variety of audiences. It's not just college hires and internships, it's people who maybe are in areas that aren't going into college. They don't have the lifestyle or the ability to go. And so this group and organization helps these disenfranchised youth in these areas that aren't as robust to be able to get engaged in technology careers. And one of the elements that they do is also tech sales. And so they will help them get into these internship programs and things like that. So I think the more companies put together those programs like Year Up is doing, that's going to help us expose technology sales careers, and it's going to help us get the word out. So it's just a challenge to everybody that's in the technology careers. What can you do? Look in the mirror and say, what can I do to help? Even at a local standpoint. Go volunteer to teach at your local high school one day to say, hey, here's what I do. Here's technology, and here's the different elements of it, why it would be interesting.
So it's our responsibility, right, as a community, right, to sort of come together and enable this to happen. And there are different initiatives, as you mentioned, like Europe, for example. And you're right, we've all got to say, how can we play that role? right, in helping the youth identify with different tech careers. Because at the end of the day, it's helpful for everybody, right? Because if they are able to find what they're passionate about, that leads to, as you mentioned, better, more diverse, more talented pools of candidates to choose from, leading to better business in the future. So it's a win-win on every situation to do things like this. So now we also do have another question from the live stream asking, what's the hardest and easiest part of selling tech?
There are a lot of hard and easy things. I think the hardest part of tech sales is making sure that we understand how to sell the value and work with the outcome that the customer is desiring.
Mhm.
We have a really bad habit in technology of taking sellers, bringing them into our company, regardless of how many years of selling they have. We bring them into our organizations and we teach them feature function. And so basically, we're teaching them to talk all about us. Me, 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 me. Here's what I do. Here's my feature. Here's my function. Here's how wonderful it is. And we do a
Mhm.
great job at that. But the hardest thing is to be able to ensure that with that knowledge, you are only speaking it in a way that is adding value to the customer or being able to derive the outcome that the customer wants. That's the hardest thing to do, is to make sure that for everything we do, we're adding value to our customer, and that in everything we do, we're helping marry our technology benefits to their needs and not just going into the room and talking all about us.
Mhm.
None of us think we do that, but most of us do. And there's statistics to back that up that say customers believe that a very 13% of sales reps really go deep into two or three of their problems. And then there's surveys out there from Gong that say 82% of customers think that their sales rep is unprepared. So when we think we're the best and that we're really doing that, the customer's perception is we're not. And so that really is the hardest thing, is to make sure that we're always looking at it from that customer perspective, not our own.
Mhm.
For me, the easiest thing is when you are selling something that you love. The easiest thing is getting on the phone with a customer and helping understand how they can benefit from it.
Mhm. Helping them understand how they can benefit from it. You're right, because when you're passionate about something, when you believe in it, I'm sure you can persuade anybody to believe that it's important to them. So that is definitely important.
If I don't believe in it, I can't sell it.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And you can tell when someone doesn't believe in what they're, being told to sell. So, yeah, that passion really does not only help. I think it's necessary today, at least, especially today, right? In a virtual environment, you can't be in person. You can't be there to sort of get that passion across. So you need to really genuinely believe in anything to sell it in an environment like today's. Now, there's another really
Follow up
interesting.
on that
Oh,
too. And
go
sorry to
ahead.
interrupt you, Tammy. Can I follow up on that too? I
Totally.
actually think it's also easy to understand the customer's business. I think salespeople, especially early in their career, think that it's really difficult or scary to understand what the customer does, and it's really truly not. If they're a
Okay.
public company, you can find the information in their annual report, in their letter to the CEO or the letter to the shareholders. If you simply read that, you understand what they're trying to do for their customers. You also understand what they're trying to do for the market and what initiatives they have.
Hmm.
If your customer is small and they're private, if you read those industry magazines and you read things up on the industry that they're in and just even spend an hour on their website, you will understand what they do. So it's
Very
really, that
nice.
is actually very easy to understand what they do. It's not scary, it's not difficult. It just requires you to be willing to do it and taking the time to do it. It's not hard. That's very easy to do.
It just goes to show that regardless of what field you're in, there's always going to be misconceptions about it. Within the field of more like development and tech, there's always the misconceptions around, what it's like to develop tech and sort of what skills you got to have. And within tech sales, there's these sorts of misconceptions that luckily, with your experience, you're helping us debunk, right? It's not that difficult to understand a customer's business. It just takes that willingness and takes those resources, but it is definitely possible. Now, another really interesting question that I think is going to sort of um, really be insightful for our audience today is, how can you tell if some research or development is meaningful or it'll sell?
Could you try
Oh,
again?
sorry, my Siri went off. Something you said made Siri go, "Hey, what?"
That happens.
uh, so ask that again, Tammy, because Siri answered you instead of me.
No worries. So my question is, or the audience's question is, how can you tell if some research or development is meaningful or it'll sell?
That is a great question. And I have a couple thoughts on that. first, before you finalize your development, you have to understand why you've developed it. And so
Hmm.
nothing should be fully developed without going through some kind of design thinking process where you're looking at what the customer's needs are and you're trying to sort them through their primary needs or even their latent needs, what you're trying to address in that market. You can't just develop something because you think it's a good idea, because there are so many technology companies that fail that have fantastic ideas, but the market wasn't there. So you have to go through that process to understand the needs of the industry and make sure that you're developing for what they're willing to pay for. So sometimes technology companies will build needs and I'm not willing to pay a premium for them. So going through that process to really understand that, the best companies will put that through a design thinking process. And if your listeners right now want to know what design thinking is, they can Google it. There's lots of information to read up on it and understand it. That's first and foremost. Then once you have those needs, everything has to be built around that messaging. And so that's how you start to know, and then you can adjust. So you put that message out there. You've validated that it's a need in the industry, and so now you're out there selling it. How you're selling it needs to match why you developed it,
Hmm.
and that will show you. And if it's not, and you're not driving the revenue or the sales, then you need to recheck. Am I, for early stage startups, am I really, have I really developed something that's the need in the market? Have I really developed something that somebody's willing to pay for? And so that's what the earlier startup companies will do. So as you guys are off developing new applications or new solutions, those are the things that you need to think about and be willing to leave room to adjust. And that's how you kind of tell it's real. You have to decide also, are you going after market share for users first, or are you trying to build something that can generate profit in your first few years? And so what features go in and what features wait?
Hmm.
And how do you validate that?
Yeah, that's again. There's so many interesting parallels that we can draw to the real world, right? So I mean, I feel like maybe a good example would be if you take a look at the latest iOS 14 release, how they just added widgets, right, to the home screen. And this I mean, on first glance, you might not realize why that's related to what you just mentioned. But if you think about it, for the longest time, companies like Apple and generally luxury brands like that haven't really cared that much about market share and more about generating profit, right? Like Apple has insanely high profit margins, but they had relatively little market share versus something like Android. But as the market landscape is starting to change towards subscriptions. It's sort of become more and more important to have a larger and larger market share, so more and more people sign up for subscriptions because not everyone's buying a phone every year, right? So adding features that Android has had for years now has become important on iOS, and it's become important to do it better because, well, you need more people to start switching over so you can sell them your subscriptions. So there's so many really interesting ways to sort of draw parallels between what you're saying and what people are actually doing in real life. So it's very interesting to see.
There's something I say in selling when I do sales training and sales enablement courses that it's war. Win,
Yeah.
adjust, race. I
Ah.
may be winning, but I need to constantly look at adjusting so that I can continue racing.
So win, adjust, and race. Now, I love that because there have been actually quite a few different like for example, a couple of weeks ago we had on the show Bob Gorley from a company UDA, and UDA stands for Observe, Orient, Decide, Act. And UDA is sort of like a fighter pilot strategy, and he talked about how UDA ties into businesses and ties into cybersecurity and so many other things that we do. And now we've got UDA, we've got war, so win, adjust, race. So these are some really nice acronyms that really help you put business into perspective and put sales really into perspective as well.
We know
Uh,
history teaches us, right? So if you
yes.
look at history of technology, look at the companies who are still around today
Hmm.
and look at the companies who have disappeared. So
Hmm.
in my lifetime, Polaroid's disappeared, Kodak's on the way out. Some of these high technology companies, Siebel, what happened, right?
Hmm.
That's my area. Siebel was the greatest CRM solution, and then Salesforce.com came out of nowhere with the SaaS subscription, and they sold differently and they offered a different value, and
Wow.
Siebel went by the wayside. So Oracle then had to quickly catch up with a cloud solution. So if you're not constantly adjusting as the market adjusts, you're not going to be in the race anymore.
Hmm.
So that's why I think you win, but you have to adjust to continue racing in order to stay with the market. It means you have to constantly listen to your customers. And that's the other key element of selling. In order to sell your solution and sell it successfully, you have to constantly listen to your customers and look at the customer journey throughout the cycle of how they're interacting with your organization, because entire organization is selling to them. And at any point in time, the customer can leave you. And we need to understand why. And so you have to adjust for that and so that you can keep going.
That makes so much sense. Thank you for sharing that example. Now, there is another question. This one's really interesting because there actually is an example that I want to share quickly, Christine, before I hand it over to you, because this is something that I feel like is something that will resonate with the person that asked this question and that is generally important for the technical landscape today. How important do you think it is for sales teams to know the technicalities of the product that's being sold? So actually, I'm going to let you answer that first, but I do have something that I want to share after this. So go ahead, Christine.
I think it's very important. I said in the beginning, when I first started into this, I thought I needed to understand what I was doing. I was selling to architects and civil engineers when I started. And so I dove into, what do civil engineers do? What's my challenge? If I don't understand what the technology is doing, then I can't articulate it in terms of the value or the outcome the customer is looking for. So there's this fine balance between understanding and knowing all the features and functions and being able to articulate it in a way that is a value statement or a desired outcome to the customer.
Mm-hmm.
If I don't understand the features and what the technology is doing, I'm going to have a hard time drawing out of the customer what their needs are. So I
Mm-hmm.
do think it's very important for sellers to really understand the technology and to really understand the customer's perspective of what those functions do. But
Mm-hmm.
be careful that you don't overextend on that, right? So there's that little fine balance that you need to do both. But yeah, I study all kinds of things with technology. I want to know and understand how to do it. When we were selling solutions at Oracle, my teams knew how to. We drank our own champagne, they say, right?
Yeah.
So we made sure we understood it, we used it, and we could talk to it. And we could demo it, right? It's not my job to maybe provide product demonstrations, but I know how to do it.
Very nice, very nice. And I feel like, again, there's so many real life examples we can take. A prime example of what a company turns out to be like when engineering teams and sales teams don't particularly communicate well is Intel, right? So if you take a look at their newest series of chips and motherboards, if you want to overclock even your RAM, which has been a standard feature on essentially, even low end motherboards for so many years now, because the RAM controllers are built right into the CPUs nowadays, you have to buy a Z series motherboard, which is the highest end motherboard. So Intel has sort of artificially placed a constraint on their technology and said, you know what, if you want to get this feature that's been available on a low end product for decades now, and you want to use it today, you've got to buy this higher end product, even though you might not need all the other features of this higher end product. So artificially adding value. And I'm pretty sure that no engineer at Intel would have said, that's what we need to do. So I feel like bridging that gap between engineering teams and sales teams and making sure they both understand a little bit of each other's role is at the very least, critical for companies to do to continue to be relevant to the people that they're actually selling to. So it's definitely really important.
The best sales leaders that are growing their companies and have that tremendous amount of growth year over year are the ones that are engaging value engineering and engaging product marketing.
Yes.
Because product marketing is that go between technology and the sales team. Listen, I used to have to get on a forecast call with Thomas Kurian when he was head of development at Oracle
Oh,
every other Friday, because
wow.
Thomas wanted to understand exactly what was going on from a sales perspective and hear directly from the executive that was in charge of that region's mouth what was going on with my customers, because he wanted to keep that connection with the sales team. And so the more you do that and the more that comes from the very top down in the organization, the more successful you're going to be. So as you're building these companies, creating that open dialogue and that open forum to understand that sales is the lifeblood of your organization. And I think that's what you said to start. You can build stuff all day long and build great solutions, but if you don't also invest in building a great sales team and keeping that relationship with the technology and development, they're hearing things from your customers you're not. And you want to understand that, because that's where that adjust comes in. You can't adjust unless you two are talking.
Absolutely. So that adjustment really is critical. Now, actually, there's another question that we just got into the live stream that is very related to what we just talked about, and that is, what are some tips for selling a technical product to non-technical people?
Very good question. That's where value selling comes in and outcome. So again, when we've talked a little bit about this, that fine line and balance between really understanding the technology and being able to articulate that to a customer turned around in the customer need. So if you understand why a customer is buying something and really what their outcome they're looking for is, the best way to sell that to them is to be able to look at your unique aspects of what you offer to bring them to that outcome.
Hmm.
You have to understand that customer first. So when you're selling to a non-technical audience, uh, technology is infamous for all our little code words and different things that we use, acronyms and this and that. You can't speak in that language. You have to speak in the customer's language, and you have to speak to the value the customer is looking for and the outcome that they want. So that's the toughest job that you have, is making sure that you know how to translate that for them. So your job as a salesperson is to take a very complex technology product and to translate that into the customer value and outcome. And if you can't do that, get help from other teams that can help you, because your customer's not going to be able to. And that really truly is the best way to sell technical stuff to a business person, is you speak in business terms on their language, not yours.
So speaking in the customer's language, right? So being able to speak in a way that doesn't talk to the technology, right? Going back to that Steve Jobs example, talking about why it's necessary for you, talking about why it's relevant to you in your life is what's absolutely critical. People, sure, numbers are important, but numbers define that innovation. But at the end of the day, customers don't care about numbers; they care about what that product's going to do for them. So being able to communicate is definitely very important. Now there's a question that we didn't get through the live stream, but we got it through LinkedIn, and I'm going to paraphrase a little bit here. And I also have some thoughts on this. But first, Christine, I want to hear what you think. And that is that if we can't sell some scientific or sort of academic advancement, then would you still classify it as innovation? Because there are lots of cases where some sort of innovation isn't sellable for some reason. So if it's not sellable, would you still classify it or count it as innovation?
I don't know as I'm the best person to ask that question, but my gut reaction to it is, of course it's still innovation. You just have to figure out the timing of when that innovation is valuable to the market. And I'll give you an example. I worked for a company many, many years ago called Bow Street. And
Mm-hmm.
at the time, it was innovative. We were selling technology that was making Java development much easier to produce new code. So instead of writing long, huge lines of Java code, we were saying, no, just write chunks of code and we will take those as building blocks and our product will assemble it dynamically, and we can create infinite amount of types of applications just from these little chunks of code, like Legos. Fabulous idea, fabulous concept. But in 2000, the market wasn't ready for it. So was it innovation? I believe yes.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't innovative for what the market needed at that time. And so you also have to think of, yes, I can innovate something, but I might not be able to get it out into the market because the market isn't ready to receive it. So I guess the answer for me is yes, but then you have to question, do I really need to waste my time doing that if I'm not ready for the market? You have to innovate and also then be able to figure out, how does that innovation fit into the market?
Yeah, because that innovation needs to be sustainable, right? You need to be able to say, I'm innovating, but I'm also going to be earning back this much X amount of money from it to be able to continue sustaining that innovation and continue providing value. It's always possible for different products to be ahead of their time. A good example, I think, would be the Julia programming language. It has tremendous innovation in its compiler technology. It's got tech that no other programming language does. It's really bleeding edge stuff. But I feel like the world just isn't ready because Julia offers too much value for us to move to it, right? There's some roadblocks on the way, like for example the fact that we have such large code bases in Python that prevent us from moving to a brand new language like Julia, which really ties into the example that you even gave. Another good example would be AMD. AMD's long been, most would say inferior to Intel chips, whereas now they've completely shifted the market, and they were able to, first of all, innovate on the CPU front. They were able to increase chip yields, they were able to increase core counts, first x86 cores to 64 cores per CPU and 2 threads per core. That's and also a consistent high clock rate. That's unheard of, right? Intel can't match that today. But apart from that innovation that AMD did, if they weren't able to sell that product, if they weren't able to convince people that yes, you want an AMD CPU and not an Intel CPU today, there would have been no purpose to that innovation. So sure, it would be innovation technically, but from a global impact perspective, I'm not sure if you could classify it as innovation, right? I mean, you would have to sort of separate that into two different categories of innovation. There's that academic innovation and that sort of innovation for helping mankind. And I feel
What's
like
the
it would.
business implication of your innovation?
Yes, the implication of your innovation. Yes, absolutely. That's
That's
a
what you're
great way to
trying
put
to
it.
get at. And I think that when you innovate, you have to be able to articulate what that business implication is. And because that defines the why now. The other element of selling is why are they doing anything, but why now? Because fear and uh, and time will keep people from buying something now. So right now, companies are still going through that uh, process of digitalizing everything. So everybody's moving to the cloud, they're all doing certain things, and so priorities may not align with your innovation. So understanding the market that you're going after and what the priorities are will help make sure that whatever you're innovating at that point in time has a business implication right now.
Mhm.
And being able to articulate that and train your salespeople how to sell to that will get your product out to market.
Absolutely. So the implication of your innovation is again really critical to take a look at alongside the pure academic standpoint. Now we're getting a really interesting question from Andy Martin. Hi Andy. Andy was a special guest a little while ago on the show. We talked about blockchain alongside Tim Duncan. He's asking, how do you sell in an industry context to demonstrate an understanding of the value chain, problems, and outcomes aligned to transformation and business value enabled by your products?
Well,
So,
thank you for that question, Andy. I do a lot of consulting that take me weeks to articulate this and train sellers to do that. So I'll try to sum it up in a short answer. To do that, you have to really, and we've talked about it a lot through this call, understanding the lens of the customer, understanding why they're doing something that will make them change, because that's what you're doing when you're selling them something, you're asking them to change the way they do things. So understanding that and be able to build around value statements and leading those questions through industry insights. So when you're selling to a particular industry, you have lots of research at your fingertips if you do the homework to be able to come out with some statistic. I threw some out on the call today, right? Around what the buyers think of us as sellers. So when you lead with statistics in that particular industry and that you have standard questions that you can ask, your customer believes you to be a thought leader. So you're adding value to every conversation with your customer. And once they keep coming back for more, then you're not just trying to sell them something. You're helping them understand the industry that they're in and the value that your solution brings to that industry. When you look at all of your sales enablement things and you look at all the different uh, training and processes that you put your sellers through, making sure that that's included in industry statistics, how to sell to certain industries and the value that they can receive from it, that's how you do that. I hope that's a very short answer to a very deep big question, but you can contact me and we can go through it in more detail if you'd like.
I feel like sometimes for questions that are as complex as this, the shorter, sweeter answers are usually a lot more effective because they sort of get across the crux of the point. And of course, I will be asking you for your contact details a little bit later towards the end of the session, and I will be putting them down in the description. So if anyone would like to contact you, Christine, they can actually go ahead and do so. Now, there is a question from Peter, and Peter asks, are there any institutions or like college or university programs that can actually help you get training or education in the field of sales?
Yes, there are lots of them. And so there are colleges out there that teach specifically on sales. I mentioned before, I spoke at a couple of different colleges. Baylor University offers it. If you're up in the Texas area, there is also University of Alabama that offers sales. So there are colleges out there that offer courses and certifications and degrees in selling. And I wish I had known that. I probably would have taken one, but you can do that. There's also groups that you can join. There's National Association of Sales Professionals. If you go to HubSpot website, they have all kinds of certifications that you can take that are geared towards how to sell, how to create leads, things like that. So really simply Google searching it will give you some. We're going to leave you in the text or with the follow-up, we'll give you a list of some of my favorites. There's Selling Power Magazine. You should sign up for that and read that online and read some of the articles there, just so that you can sort of surround yourself with the things that are going on from a sales profession. It is a profession, and that means that we have to constantly read and articulate our business just like any other profession would. You have to stay in touch with technology and new technologies that are coming out. I have to stay up to speed on different things that are happening in the world of sales. And so I'll leave you a list of some of those things, but colleges for sure, organizations, they're free to join. All those things are great things that you should do. Even if you're not a salesperson, if you are a technologist that's trying to learn how to get your product out to market, I encourage you to join some of those organizations and learn how to do basic selling.
Definitely. I will be putting those links in the description, and so anybody that would like to take a look at those, feel free to do so. There's another really interesting question from Tassin again. He's asking, what will the world of tech sales look like in 5 years and in the future?
I don't know. And if I did, I would build a technology solution out right now and be a billionaire. I believe that the way we are leaning is the technology companies that sell with the customers in mind, walking a mile in their shoes, looking at it through their lens, adding value through every conversation. Those are the elite sellers. I believe, and I wrote an article in Selling Power magazine a couple weeks ago on this, I believe that selling is going to only be that. You will not engage in sales processes or engage in conversations with customers unless you're adding value to them and their business. And so focusing on them and what their needs are. I think selling is going to transform into more of that as we go along. How we arrive at that, I think that technology is so fast and developing. Who knows? And we don't really know what's going to happen with the behaviors around social distancing and when are we going to be allowed back into our customers' offices. So I think that's all up to form itself over the next couple of years, but always focusing on the customer and how you explain their value. That right there will take you into the next 5 years and be
Absolutely.
successful.
That's the overall trend for the next 5 years, right? So, I mean, of course, if we could tell the future, we'd be building a company to match that solution. But yes, now another question, and this question is from Muthu on YouTube. He's asking, do you think business relationships and customer sentiments play a major role in successfully selling technology more than proving what the technology is actually solving?
Yes.
Interesting. Okay. In what sense?
A good salesperson doesn't ask an open question like that. You have to ask an open-ended question. So now I just gave you a yes or no example. So I'm giving you a little lesson on how to ask that question. So yes, I believe that we are always going to be looking at what's valuable for the business and what they're doing, and those are just ways that we have to be able to learn about that and articulate. And I think that's where we have to understand business acumen. We don't have to be masters in business. I don't have to have a degree in business, but I do have to understand the implications for that business and how that affects it.
So, sorry, go ahead. Go ahead, sorry.
I said, does that answer your question?
It does answer my question, but I hope it answers Muthu's question. In case you have more questions around that, feel free to put those in the live stream chat, and we'll go ahead and answer them. But I think that does answer the question, and you're right. Don't ask an open-ended question like that. Be more specific with what we want. All right. So another question is, let's see, how would you advise a woman to pivot into the technology field?
I love that question. I think, and I'm going to answer this from a technology sales perspective, because I think there's all kinds of things out there for guiding women in STEM careers right now. There's all kinds of organizations and things that young women can get engaged with in order to drive towards STEM. I think where we're still seeing a shortage of is women in tech sales. And so I think in order to guide them through that, we have to help them understand what it's about. I believe that lifestyle is a challenge. So people are afraid of the lifestyle from a tech sales perspective and not understanding how you can balance both. And so I think companies need to do a better job of helping women, attracting them in to understand how they can be both a parent and be able to be a leader in technology. Companies are doing a much better job of that now than they did when I first started, 20 plus years ago. And so I think that it's getting out again, getting out and where they're at. So going where they're going. There's a great organization called National Association of Women Sales Professionals run by a woman named Cynthia Barnes. think that if we can help Cynthia gain more exposure, she is doing a great job of just mentoring women in sales professions, not always just tech, but women in sales professions. It's, selling is different, and it doesn't necessarily always align with the personalities for women. And so trying to understand how we can engage is that. I think women make better sellers because we naturally have more empathy. And that's when I said that's one of the key traits you look for. So I think it's getting exposure to that and helping these organizations get the word out so that they can draw more women in sales.
Very nice. Thank you. Also, another question. Okay, so by the way, I do hope that answered your question, ALRC. If you have more follow-up questions to that, feel free to put those in the chat, and we'll go ahead and answer those as well. Now, we do have another question. Let's see, where is this from? This question is from Mayor. He's asking, how do you get the attention of different prospects and win them over virtual discussions?
Yeah, that's a hard one. So, because that's something that COVID's put us into, right? So COVID has changed this. I used to have sellers that could walk the halls of their customer, and they had a badge and they could walk up and down and meet people in different meetings in the hallways, and now everything's virtual. I think we're still trying to figure that out on how do we connect with people virtually. I think that understanding and making sure that you are really good at Zoom meetings is key to it. So you really have to understand how to connect with people, and it doesn't change, right? It's listening. It's making sure that if you're in a Zoom meeting that have several people, that you master engaging all the people that are on the Zoom and giving everybody a chance to speak, and that you own the meeting. And so virtually, when you're connecting with them, you have to make sure that it stays personal. And that's going to be key. Like, for instance, you're seeing my background right now. I'm at my home, right? I'm at a home. I'm in a bedroom shoved away because we have guests. It's Sunday and there's people out, and my office is too noisy, so I'm tucked back in a corner. And so it makes it personal. And so those are things that we have to do on a virtual meeting, is make sure that you still engage from a personal perspective. You engage everybody in the room, the Zoom room, and that you understand how to leverage those meetings. There's all kinds of tips and tricks out there, and you really need to study how to do that. And how to leverage that. And that connection, that personal connection is key in social. So the other way we talked about non-Zoom meetings, social, was engaging with them on social media, actually making comments, liking their posts, commenting on their posts, asking questions on their posts. So not just following, but engaging on social media, you get further.
Interesting. So speaking of keeping things personal, what you're saying is I shouldn't be using a virtual background like this?
Demands it, right? So sometimes you should use virtual backgrounds, and sometimes it's necessary based on the audience when you're doing big trainings or big teachings. But when you're having chats like this, it makes it more personal to have it be an open background, so that we're more comfortable. We're in our home offices, or maybe we're back in our office. It's just a more comfortable setting. But sometimes it does dictate that you do virtual meetings. I think somebody did a study, and it was on Forbes. I read Forbes Council magazine had a study that people actually on their survey preferred the natural background versus the digital backgrounds. So, yeah.
Very nice. As a matter of fact, actually, what you mentioned, this is sort of the reason that I started TechLifeSkills in the first place. It's because, people, through this sort of virtual aspect, really need to feel that personal connection to the actual leaders in the tech field and people who are making these changes in the field of tech. And I feel like when we're actually able to learn from their experiences, like we are from you today, I feel like that's so much better. Things have changed so much, and I feel like this is like the perfect way for us to learn from experts in the field and sort of gain from their experience, right? So I feel like that's very important. There is another question from Mandar on YouTube. He's asking, how important is educating the customer on affecting sales?
How important is it on educating the customer on
affecting sales? So how important is educating? Sorry, I feel like if I paraphrase this, it'll be a bit better. So, how does educating customers affect sales, basically?
Educating customers affects sales. It's very important. So I think that, again, you're fine line, right? So it's a fine line between educating them on my product, but I also want to make sure I educate them on the industry and the value or the business implication that it's bringing to the industry, I view that as my role. If I can't educate them in some way, not just my product, but something else, I probably won't get in front of them as often, and my competitor will.
Mhm.
And so if I have to make sure I'm bringing value to every conversation, and the best way to bring value is to educate. I want to become a thought leader. I want to become the person that my customer comes to for information, because they can Google my product features and function on my website, and they can
Mhm.
read all about it. And buyers do that before they come to us as sellers. They research. So it's very important that you do that, Mandar. If that, I hope that's the way we're asking that question. If not, do a follow up, and we can expand.
I do believe so. If in case you do have more questions, again, feel free to put them into the live stream. Now, another question from Tassin. He's asking, what is your advice to a complete beginner who wants to get into the field of tech sales?
I believe that you should go to some seminars, and I offer you some of those things. You could go look on HubSpot's website. They do a great job of producing different things that you seminars and things that you can watch, videos that you can watch and learn. I think that you could join a sales organization and start reading. So read some books on selling. There's an older one that's called Insight Selling. It's one of my favorites because it teaches you how to use insights and knowledge to sell value. So read some of those sales books, and that will help you identify what some of the key attributes or traits are that you need to start practicing, and then go find the places that teach you how to do that. I also think that if you're currently employed in an organization, I think that it's okay to raise your hand and say, hey, I might be interested in trying sales out for a while. Could I do a side job or a side gig to
Mhm.
sit in and listen in on business development and make their calls? Could I monitor and watch what's happening? So I think those are also good ways to start to learn how to get into it. And once you're committed and you want to do it, you do. You have to raise your hand to say, hey, I want to do it. Most sellers start out pounding the phones, sending emails. You're looking for leads. You're not actually the one closing the deals. You're looking for leads for somebody else to close. And be willing to do that. And then be willing to listen and watch the behaviors of sellers who have already been in the field for a while.
Yeah, I feel like it's also really important that sellers, are sort of understand those educating the customer very well, because really, I'm going to draw a parallel to IBM this time. So we've done Apple, we've done Intel, we've done AMD. Let's go to IBM. Mainframes are traditionally viewed as like these super old computers. The future is distributed, the future is cloud, the future is Kubernetes, this sort of thing. But people don't really realize that even technologies like mainframes really have a place in modern society, right? The mainframe business unit is still going. And it's going very strong. It's better than it's ever been, really. And people think it's dying every couple of years. We'll see the mainframe is dying, and every couple of years it'll be posted on all the major news articles, and suddenly the next year there's a new mainframe out, and people love it. And the reason for this is because mainframes have genuine technical advantages, right? So you take a look at what is a mainframe. It's a complex instruction set computer, which is traditionally lower performance, right? Like x86, or at least lower performance per watt. But then you take a look at IBM Z, and they're implementing a complex instruction set with no microcode. So they're able to decode complex instructions on the fly. They've got double, triple redundancy for everything. You can go and pull a CPU off of a mainframe, and it wouldn't skip a heartbeat. It would just keep going. So there's so many aspects that you need to take a look at, and just being able to educate the customer as to what the technicalities are is really important. There was also so the question that I was asking you a little while ago, around what advice you would have for a woman getting into the field of tech. That was from ALRC, and she is getting back to us and saying, thank you, but I was meaning how to pivot from my current career, which is sourcing, into maybe an AI tech career. I love technology, but I'm a bit scared of making the jump into something technical. So just before you answer that, or give your thoughts on it, Christine, I did already put in the chat a link to cognitiveclass.ai, which is a source for free courses and an environment to run your code. Ale also asked, any sources to learn the basics of AI? Cognitiveclass.ai also has AI courses. It's about programming and AI and machine learning and all that sort of stuff. So feel free to use that source. But Christine, what do you think? Ale is saying, I love technology, but I'm a bit scared of making the jump into something so technical. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, after 20 years of selling and 10 years at Oracle, the first thing I did when I left Oracle was sign up for an AI class at MIT. So, because that was scary for me, right? It was scary to say, hey, I've sold sales solutions and CRM technologies for the better part of my career. So I've spent most of my career selling to salespeople. and I wanted to do something different. And so the first thing I did was go take a class on AI, but the business implications of AI, so that I could understand how do you look at how AI is applied to the world of business, and what are the aspects of it, and how do you learn how to discover those things. So I think those types of education and looking at those types of things take the scare away. So it made me more confident in what I was able to do, and makes me more confident. And now I'm advising for AI companies. And so because I understand a little bit more about what's going on. So I think to take the fear out of that, there's nothing wrong with trying something and trying a career in sales or trying a career in tech instead of sourcing. And if you don't like it, you can go back to doing what you were doing. And so you have to take the leap, and you have to trust in yourself and trust in the process of exploration. I did it. I left after 10 years. The company I was successful at, I loved it, but I wanted to make a pivot, and I wanted to make a shift, and I wanted to learn some different things. And so at any age, at any point, yes, it's scary, but I think there's enough out there and enough support and momentum to really help us do that. And that's where joining some of these organizations, getting a mentor that's in that field that can help you understand and think through those processes. If I had something to do again, it would go back earlier in my career and get female mentors. I had great mentors, but I didn't have any women mentors because they just simply didn't exist in technology sales. There weren't that many of us. And so find somebody that, before you make that shift, find somebody that's doing that job already, and get a mentorship going with them.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing. I'm sure that's helping you, Ale. If you have more questions, again, feel free to put them in the live stream. I do see that you said, so there is one more question. I don't think, unfortunately, I have much. So the question is, thanks, any source to find scholarships? Unfortunately, I'm not very sure about that. But Christine, any thoughts from you on that?
I don't know. I think that you would go find colleges that teach. If we're talking about tech sales, go find colleges that teach selling classes, and then look into scholarships specifically at those colleges. I think there's also these programs, like I mentioned, Year Up. Like, start investigating Year Up, and trying to figure those things out to see what's available to them. And there's stuff out there. You just have to do a little bit of research. I apologize. I don't specifically have some firsthand knowledge, but on where those college scholarships would be. But I would certainly start with colleges who actually teach selling, and then go find out from them.
Absolutely. Yeah. So unfortunately, we don't have many resources here, but again, any more sort of specific questions, feel free to put them down in the description, or in the comments below after the live stream on the replay, and we'll try and get back to as many as we can. Really quickly, side note, sort of housekeeping note, there is a question on, could AI be harmful for humans in the future? We're not going to get to that question today, since today's separate, but feel free to come back next week, because we've got some really interesting content lined up, and I can't tell you too much about it just yet, but it's going to be super exciting, so make sure you do join back in next week. So now, last question for now, from Tassin. He's asking, any interesting previous memories or stories you want to share in the field of tech sales?
Well, of course, I've been doing this for a very long time. I didn't get these gray hairs through any other interesting stories in tech sales. Oh gosh, I have learned over the years that you have to be flexible. And so being flexible in the selling is something that I've learned. And so one of the things doing that is, I was asked, I'll just share the story. I was asked to speak at a sales conference for Oracle in front of probably 500 or 600 salespeople. And at the time in my career, that was a large audience for me to speak live on stage. And so I said, sure, I'll play into that. I'll do that. I can stand up and talk about the future and what we're doing with the sales organization and the team. And so I was very nervous about doing it to begin with. And as I arrived backstage, one of the pre-sales engineers comes up and says, "Here's your outfit." And I was like, "What? My outfit? What do you mean my outfit?" They had gone, it was a skit. And they neglected to tell me that during my skit, which I knew was a skit, that I had to wear an outfit. So now I'm already nervous about going out on stage, which is frightening. And as a sales rep, you have to be able to speak in front of people no matter the size of the audience. So Toastmasters, note to self, take that. I'm already nervous about going on stage, and she hands me this bag from Forever 21. Now I'm in my, I'm too old to be wearing Forever 21. I'm not 21. And inside the bag are these fake leather pants, a t-shirt that says I am the boss, bangled bracelets, and a wig. And I was like, there's no way I'm walking out on stage in that. My team, my salespeople are out there, other people, like 500 people, no way. Well, I did. I did it. It was a lot of fun. And I learned from the experience that you have to be willing to adapt and you have to be willing to go with the flow and do what's necessary. And to this day, I still remember that at any point I get nervous about going out on stage, I just think it can't ever be worse than walking out on stage in that outfit. So that's my fun story.
That's definitely a fun story. There have been there have been some interesting things that I've had to do as well. So yeah, you got to be flexible, right? That's sort of the moral of the story there. Now there is one last question that I want to ask you just before we leave today, and that last question is: what was the situation of tech sales in the past, and how is it being developed now?
I think the situation of tech sales when I first started, first of all, it was a very male dominated industry and there were not very many women in tech sales. So today, more and more women are being drawn into the tech sales group. So that's one major difference. From a how we sold perspective, we sold in back in the day very, very feature function. That was just what we did. We were so proud and excited of selling what we did that we went out and told customers, here's what we do and what you're doing and what you're doing is wrong, do it this way instead. And it worked back then, but I think today you have to sell the outcome. So just as we moved from on-premise to SaaS or to cloud, we now have to move to selling feature functions to selling outcomes, and because that's what a customer wants to buy, and I'll be willing to pay for that. So that's going to dictate the value I'm willing to pay for is the outcome that I want. And so that's the difference, the way we sell today versus the way we used to sell.
Also, one last question from Tassin. This is really our last question for the live stream, but it is very interesting. Any closing notes for businesses in the case of sales and for beginners as well?
I believe that businesses need to invest heavily in retraining their sales teams to understand the value that they offer to their customers. That's my advice. If they can't do that, they're not adjusting. So that win, adjust, race, businesses need to look at how are they going to adjust and continue to adjust and innovate how they sell the same effort they put into innovating their product. They have to re-innovate how they sell and constantly adjust, and businesses don't put enough, most businesses don't put enough effort into that. So they need to do that. Then for the individual seller, to getting into it, a beginning sales rep, just really research and educate. Find something that you're passionate about. Sell something you're passionate about. There's plenty out there of technology things to sell. Find the one that speaks to you and find the one that you feel so passionately about. You will build a very successful career off of that. But again, you also need to be willing to learn how to pivot. If you asked an on-premise sales rep years ago to go sell the cloud, they were really uncomfortable and they'd squish around in their seat. And they're like, no, I made a ton of money off of selling this one thing and I'm going to keep doing it my way. And you can't. Selling is also constant adjustment in how what I'm selling and how I interact. So as a beginning sales rep, always be learning or willing to learn. I'm a 25-year veteran. I'm still learning.
Very nice. So always be willing to learn. I feel that, there's some lessons that are really applicable across all fields. One of them is always being willing to learn. But I feel like this especially applies to the field of tech sales. There's the classic joke that no one's been fired for buying a product from IBM ever, we don't want people buying or selling products because of that joke, right? We want people to be buying because of genuine, value and technical merit. So always being willing to learn, willing to be at that cutting edge, willing to look at what's new, I think is absolutely critical. Now, before we leave today, there is one question that I have for you, and that is: would you like to share a closing message with the audience before we leave?
Oh, I would. Thank you so much. First, thanks for hosting me today. I enjoy talking about my career and my passions, and I love being able to share with people that want to get into sales. And so if there's anything else I can do for anyone, connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm an open networker, meaning I will communicate with you. I don't want you to just send me an invite, I click yes, and then we never speak or we never interact. So I will interact with those who want to reach out to me. So feel free to do that and find me on LinkedIn. I will be willing to offer advice or mentor as I can. But I believe passionately that the world of sales is going to continue to change. We've talked a lot about that today. And so as we innovate products and innovate solutions, let's not forget how we innovate those in a way that the market is willing to accept, and that we embrace that and teach our sellers. And as a salesperson, be willing to learn what the customer outcome is and what value do they want to derive out of that, and invest heavily in learning as much about your customer and their market as you know about your own product. If you do that, your career in sales is going to go very far.
Thank you
And
very
I wish
much.
you all the best of success. So thanks, Tanmay, for having me.
Thank you very much, Christine. It was an honor to have you on the show. This was really an insightful session. There's so many unique perspectives that you've shared with us today that I think, are basically impossible to get without the kind of experience that you have. To think that this entire session today is being held because of that one chance encounter that you had, on the phone, and someone said, you know what, I think you would do great in sales. That chance was absolutely great. So, as you mentioned, we now have this responsibility, right? We have this. It's sort of something that we need to do. It's what we owe back to society to enable the youth to find out what it is that they're passionate about by, once we get into these careers, by enabling them to find out more about it and by connecting with them, which has always been a goal of mine too, right? Being able to connect back with the youth, being able to, work with them and sort of answer their questions and tell them what the world of tech is like. So again, that's one of the reasons that we're holding the show today, right? Your son, right, being so excited by the world of tech and how it ties into the automotive industry, but not initially starting that way, even though he lives in the same household as you, even though his mom is so passionate about the world of tech. Also love that new sort of way you've had us all think about diversity, right? It's not just about cherry picking diverse candidates just to tick a box. It's about really embracing that and enabling society as a whole to have this more diverse pool of candidates by enabling everybody to find out what it is that they're passionate about. And another thing around the success. How can you be successful in the world of tech sales? It's all about that desire to win. It's about that passion. It's about that perseverance at the end of the day, and being able to really want to reach your goals. So thank you very much, Christine, for sharing all of that. This was really, really exciting. And of course, thank you, everybody that's joining the live stream, for actually joining in today. Now, as you know, this series is held every Sunday in the morning Eastern time. And next week, we've got some super exciting content lined up. I'm just really very excited for next week. We're going to have a super discussion on all sorts of technologies, all the way from AI and machine learning to quantum and blockchain and all sorts of different tech. We're going to be talking with some executives from IBM Research, so you won't want to miss out. And we're also going to be demonstrating a product for the first time publicly, so some really interesting stuff is coming up next week. Now, we are going to be talking about the intersection of software engineering and artificial intelligence and so much more, so make sure you do join in. But once again, thank you, Christine. This was really an insightful discussion. It was an honor to have you on. And of course, all the links that were promised and all the different contact info will be in the description, so if you'd like to contact Christine, as she mentioned, she's an open networker, so she will be in touch with you. Anything else you'd like to share, Christine?
No, I just, again, thank you for hosting me. This was awesome, and I love it. And this is part of me embracing getting out into the world and helping to advocate and educate people on the world of tech sales. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to do that.
Thank you very much. It was great to have you on, and I'm sure everybody's really loved our discussion. And so, of course, if there were any other questions that we weren't able to answer, feel free to do that. Feel free to put them in the comments, and we'll go ahead and respond to those. And thank you very much, Christine. Thank you to everybody joining the live stream today, and we will see you next week. Goodbye.
Bye.